I just decided I wanted to go. Well, what I did is I went in the National Guard in 49. Then January of 50, I transferred over to the Army, regular Army. And they sent me to Japan. Then when Korea broke out, they sent me to Korea. Korea was terrible. And then in the wintertime, when we was up north, we didn't have any winter gear. And that, with the wind blowing, it was about 40 degrees below zero. It really gets cold up there. They tried to get me to take a commission out of Korea, and I wouldn't. Then they wanted me to take one officer, and I'll just keep what I got. And I come in one day from up north, and Lieutenant told me, he said, "Well, do I call you Sergeant or Mister?" I said, "What to do is to kick me out while I was gone?" No, he said, "There's one officer appointment for you on personnel. You better go over and check." I wouldn't take it, so they sent it to me. Vietnam, I was there in 62, then again in 65, and then again in 70. I didn't mind Vietnam near as much as I did Korea. Yeah, I spent a year up at the Campaign for Washington Atomic Energy Commission up there in 53. I retired at Fort Bliss. I was in Slayfield Missile Command there. No, if I was going to, the places I'd like to go back to would probably be, number one would be Australia. I really loved that down there. To go to each service and talk to the recruiter, see what the recruiter has to offer, and then they could make their own decision. But I wouldn't say just go to one and like I did, but I knew what I wanted to do. So. If you follow the rules and regulations, it's not hard to get promoted, and it's just a job, except when you're in combat. and it's good retirement. I liked the service. It was good to me.
My name is Donna Harrison. I was in the Air Force. I retired as a major. I was commissioned in 1981. I went to the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. I was in the second class of women at that institution. And then I retired. I actually took the early retirement in 1997. So it was, 16 years active duty, and then the 4 years at the academy prior to that. As a matter of fact, my father is Navy, career Navy. He's a Navy pilot. And at the time that I was getting close to graduating from high school is when Congress approved having women attend the service academies, West Point, Annapolis, and Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, I guess, and the Coast Guard Academy, the four of them. My senior year when I graduated, this might, I don't know if it's a good story or bad story, but there were 3 women in my class, and this was in a high school in Maryland. One actually, she got into the Air Force Academy. I got into the prep school. And then a good friend of mine, she got a 4-year ROTC scholarship to Duke, Air Force scholarship, Air Force ROTC. And we actually had a junior ROTC program there at high school. None of us were in it. Normally you apply like starting in August and September, going into your senior year, and I didn't find out about it until like December, January. So, and I just happened to fill out the Air Force one first. It was a lot of work, and I'm like, my dad kept the military at home, at work. And so, although we were technically military brats and we moved around a fair bit, it was never something where, I didn't say yes, sir, to my father or anything like that. So I wasn't really, it was just kind of like, okay, well, I don't really know what I'm going to do. Sure, I'll apply. And it's like, oh, that's a lot of work. That's like, so fine. And so I actually didn't get into that first class, but my application supposedly, because of, they had already picked that first core of women, so they're like, well, we're still interested in you, and they have a prep school right there on the same campus as the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, and they're like, would you go to the prep school? Which, in hindsight, was really, really good for me, because I was very close to my family, an opportunity to go, get out on my own, but, and it was a military institution, but it wasn't the rigor that the Air Force Academy itself was. And so I did that, and then got right into the academy for that second class of women. The Air Force Academy they're training you to become officers to lead people. So if you were in your freshman year, it might be difficult to just push you right out to be an officer, and to be called in. Whereas at the prep school, you're basically an airman, so you're going to be taking orders and pretty much doing what needs to be done. I was in political science, but I took mechanical engineering, I took organic chemistry, I took electrical engineering, I took Russian, usually carried anywhere from 18 to 21 credit hours a semester. So it was a very rigorous academic program. So along with your academics, there's also certain expectations for your fitness. You have to pass fitness tests. And then there's the leadership piece of it too, where the academy is approximately 4,000 people, and it's, and that's called a wing, and there's 4 groups under the wing, and then I guess it's, probably, I should know this, how many squadrons? There's 10 squadrons in each one of the groups. And so there's leadership, as freshmen, they're called dualies. You don't have a lot of responsibility. You're just kind of being told what to do all the time. And when you become a sophomore, then you're really taking care of the dualies, and then it goes on up the line. So you're getting more and more training as far as becoming a leader with the expectation that obviously when you graduate from the Air Force Academy, you're going to be commissioned as a second lieutenant, and you will be responsible for your airmen or your junior officers as you go up in the ranks. I will say that a lot of folks went into different programs from that. They might go on to pilot training or helicopter training or become a physician or whatever, but generally speaking, that's sort of the route that they were training us for, is to become leaders in the Air Force. From Colorado Springs, I went to the Pentagon, and then from the Pentagon, I went to Australia, and from Australia, I went to Canada, and then from Canada, I went to Texas, and then I got out after that. So kind of bounced around a little bit there. I had always wanted to go to New Zealand, and then I found out that there was a station in Australia, and I was like, you look at the map and you're like, oh, that's close. Well, they're like 2,000 miles apart. It's deceiving. But I loved Australia. I mean, it was just, I was single at the time. We had a rigorous, it was 15 days on, 4 days off. And we worked, shift work, 5 swings, 5 mids, 5 days. And, but it was in a good group of people. We had a pretty neat mission, which if I told you, I'd have to kill you. No, I'm just joking. Got to do a lot of different things, that I'd never done before. When I was in, women couldn't, they just opened up pilot training for women, but you couldn't fly in any combat-related type, certainly aircraft or anything that was going to go in theater anywhere where there was combat. But, that opened up. I kind of have mixed feelings, and I think if, depending upon, the topic, and it's not always straight, okay, well, women should be able to do whatever. But on the other hand, too, I don't think a woman should be penalized. Like, for instance, for folks to make it all the way to a 4-star general, there's certain positions and steps that you pretty much have to do that or you'll never get there. Well, if it's at a place where they'll never let women there, then even though you could do this job here, but you didn't do this job here, you can never get there. That doesn't seem to be correct to me. And I think the Air Force is getting better about it. I think the military, at least I hope they are. I don't know. My understanding is the Air Force seemed to be a little more open to at least accepting or embracing is probably too strong a word, or not the correct word, women into their ranks. But especially for like myself, being in that, some of the first groups that were there where the upperclassmen were all men. My second to last job, I had 100 airmen that reported up to me. It was on the maintenance side of the house, and we worked in support of the Army at Fort Hood, which is the largest military base outside of the former Soviet Union. But there were some jobs where I was what was called the executive officer, which is like an administrative assistant to a general. And so I didn't actually write reports on people, but I was involved in a lot of what was going on in that particular unit just because the general was in charge. So I've had numerous jobs when I was in the Air Force. I think for me, it just opened up a lot of opportunities that I would have never considered even trying or even thinking about. You know, I was talking about the school. You know, I wouldn't have taken mechanical engineering. You know, I wouldn't. And I didn't get a great grade in there, but I learned something from it. You know, it's being exposed to so many different ideas and people, and I think that was probably what I appreciated most about it. And I think the second thing for me is that it's sort of ingrained in me the idea, I mean, I'm not a religious person, but the idea of service, you know, not just, I mean, obviously you serve in the military, but it must have hit home for me because I just feel like it's important that we, whether you're in the military or not, we serve our communities and we do what we can.
What division of the military were you in?
I was in the Armor Division, 40th Armor, Hell on Wheels, Company C.
And what was your rank when you left the military?
When I left, it was Staff Sergeant. I was a tank commander.
Did you choose the Army over any of the other branches for a particular reason?
I had other friends that had joined, and they talked me into it, you know. And Vietnam was a big topic at that time during 65, 66, and I thought that'd be a good way, even as a freshman in high school, a senior in high school, to support, you know, our military.
Did you join voluntarily?
Yeah, I was in the Army Reserves.
Okay.
Spent 6 years from 66 to 72. And, you know, we did all kinds of maneuvers and practice and stuff like that. And I did do some, you know, active duty, about 6 months worth, you know.
Were you in Vietnam?
No, it was during the Vietnam War, but no, I didn't go to Vietnam.
Did you travel overseas or
No,
anywhere? Just all stateside?
It's all stateside, yes.
Did you and any of your friends stay in the same company or
Yes,
group?
yeah.
You all joined together?
All joined together. We joined together. We went to basic training together. And then after this, our MOSs, our military service occupations, they had different ones and I had different ones. It was funny because my MOS was a clerk typist. And I didn't know how to type. But that was the Army. And I used to gravitate to the tanks, the Armor 48 tanks. And one time they called me in and said, we see that you lean towards the tank all the time. You're out there with the guys. And I said, yeah, I sure am. And they said, would you like to change your MOS? I said, you bet. I want to be out there with the men, you know. And I remember they did. They changed it. And I ended up in the tanks, learned more about the tanks from the bottom up, changing tracks, to doing little mechanical work. We had mechanics that did everything, but we'd help them out, and then doing maneuvers and starting off as a gunner, you know, loading up them big shells into the cannons, and ended up, after I think about 4.5 years later, I was promoted to tank commander, and that was pretty neat. We did our summer camps in different places, Fort Hood, you know, also in Camp Irwin, in Death Valley, and we went to San Luis Obispo, and that was up there. That was more of a, for 2 weeks we had a lot of education. It wasn't doing the tanks and stuff. So it was interesting because I chose to go to the tanks. And I remember one time we were in bivouac there in Fort Hood, Texas, and we had gone 2 days and 2 nights without showers, and we were all over the place, you know, playing war. And I remember coming in, we were all tired, and then bringing in the tanks, and we parked them, and then we were walking into the mess hall tents, and there were showers there, and there's other tents there. And here, the one side was rolled up from the big tent, and got to see all these. There's about 10 soldiers in there, all nice and crisp with green fatigue uniforms, having coffee. They were clerk typists. I said, "Oh, Nabu." I grew up in a mining family. I was 4th generation miner. My grandparents, my dad, my great grandparents, you know, they mined a little bit, but it was small mining, real caves and stuff. And then my dad, my brother and I, my brother was working in the mines, and that's all I was hear was the mine talk. I got in the apprenticeship program, and after 4 years I graduated, and I was out in the mine with my tools, you know, working on shovels and drills, and they needed a team leader, so I put my name in, and I became the team leader of our group. It was the electrical department in the mine. And they were opening up Morenci. Morenci mill had been shut down for years, and they sent me over there to help the startup. And then from there I went into a whole circle. I was the administrator for the apprenticeship program. I started spending money left and right. I built classrooms and multimedia stuff from you know, cameras to computers to Wi-Fi to all kinds of stuff, and we were teaching the electricians. And then they grew bigger, and they called me in and said, "Hey, we need to make it a little bit bigger for mechanics and stuff like that." So we started getting mechanic instructors and using the same building, and then an opportunity came to retire early. So they would pay me a handful of money and make me whole, and I couldn't say no, so here I am.
And I know you've spoken on kind of how you felt about being a veteran, but do you think the culture towards veterans is changing? I know the Vietnam era, it was probably really hard, but does it feel different now?
Oh yes, by all means. I think people are more appreciative. They acknowledge you in a respectful way, you know, and they thank you. So I think it's totally different now compared to what it used to be. We don't think of the chemists, the doctors, the nurses, the people that mechanics that, like you said, that keep things running, railroad engineers. All this is pertaining to the services, some type of service that for the armed forces, and we overlook them. Our minds are, you went to war, you know. No, everybody's on the team. The field of honor is to me a gesture of appreciation and to all veterans, and the parade. We need to celebrate our veterans. You know, we need to make it bigger, and simply because they deserve it. All veterans deserve it. Doesn't matter, you know, if you go to war, if you don't. It's like a football team, you know. Sometimes you might think you're not a veteran because you didn't go to war, but you're part of the team, ready to go if needed. I was on that team, ready to go.
I joined the United States Marine Corps in 1992.
And how long were you in?
I served for just over 6 years. I left active duty in 1998.
What inspired you to join?
Inspiration actually was lifelong for me. So I was a military brat. I grew up in an Air Force family. My dad served 26 years. So when I was born into the military lifestyle, it's kind of all I knew. And I didn't plan to go that route. I had planned to go to college and kind of follow a traditional path in life. But things changed for me. I enlisted in the Marine Corps, and so goes the story. My dad was in the Air Force. He actually was born and raised in Nogales, Arizona, so not too far from here. He left his house when he was 17, joined the Air Force, went overseas to Vietnam shortly thereafter, but he stayed in for a total of 26 years, and I came along somewhere during that career, and that's the lifestyle I knew.
And do you have siblings?
I do. I do have siblings, so I have a brother, older brother, and then an older sister.
Are either of them serving or have served?
Neither one of them serve. Come from a broken family, so my parents divorced when I was 6. And I say luckily I went to live with my dad, but I did because I feel I got the better end of the stick, being able to travel the world. I lived in Germany for almost 10 years as a kid, which was amazing, and that opportunity wouldn't have happened for me had I not grew up with my dad.
Do you speak German?
I speak a little German, so ich spreche ein bisschen Deutsch, but it's been over 30 years, so some of it's still in the back of my mind there. It's incredible to grow up overseas. Granted, I lived on an Air Force base, but I had free reign to leave the base. I was over there when the wall came down. I was able as a young driver to drive on the Autobahns, which is amazing for any teenage boy. I can't imagine how my parents thought about that, but they let me do it, and I'm still here today to talk about it. But the experiences growing up overseas are incredible.
And so what made you choose Marine Corps?
Yeah, good question. So growing up an Air Force brat, and like I mentioned, I spent almost 10 years overseas in Germany, interacted a lot with Air Force and Army during high school sports, etc. And what changed? Why did I go to the Marine Corps? You know, no offense to the Army and Air Force, Navy, Coast Guard brother and sisters out there, but I wanted a challenge, and the Marine Corps boot camp is known as being one of the more challenging boot camps, and I wanted to be able to say I did it, I completed it, and be part of the brotherhood and the sisterhood of being a United States Marine. So that's why I changed paths, and you know, believe it or not, my dad was very supportive. He actually wanted to enlist in the Marine Corps instead of the Air Force, but at that time Vietnam was just starting up, and he knew if he went Marines he would be overseas in Vietnam right away, and as the story goes, he went to Vietnam right away as an airman. So I was stationed, luckily MCRD San Diego is where I went to boot camp. I say luckily, but the hard thing about MCRD, if anybody's ever flown into San Diego, is the airport is adjacent to MCRD. So you see the planes coming and going all day long, and you just want to be on one, but you do what you're supposed to do and stay. From San Diego, I went up to Camp Pendleton. That's where every Marine, well, every West Coast Marine, I should say, does basic school of infantry. From there, I was assigned to 29 Palms in California and did my communications training for my MOS, which was 2542. And then after that, I knew it was coming, but I went overseas again. So I was stationed in Okinawa, Japan for a year and went to Camp Courtney. The interesting thing about that is for about 12 years of my life, 11 of those were spent overseas. So not that that was a bad thing. Talk about experiences in life. That was incredible. Going from Europe to Asia and being able to experience that. From Camp Courtney, I came back stateside. I was stationed at Marine Corps Air Station Yuma, not too far from here, and that is where I finished my career as a Marine. I actually had orders to Kanaoe Bay in Hawaii, but I turned those down to get out of the Marine Corps, much to my wife's chagrin, and moved her back to Tucson for my law enforcement career.
When were you married? Where did you meet her?
So where did well, I met my wife in Tucson, Arizona, believe it or not. So I enlisted in Phoenix, Arizona. My dad retired in Phoenix back in 1991. I lived with him for a few years. I had just graduated high school, and then decided I was going to enlist in the Marine Corps. It took a couple of months to get off to boot camp, but I did, and I went to visit a high school friend in Tucson. He actually wound up joining the Air Force a little while later, and visit his mom, who I grew up with both of them for several years in Germany. And when I went to meet him, I met my wife. My wife actually worked with his mom, and don't show her this, but it was love at first sight. And 30 years later, here we are, 6 kids and a grandbaby, second one on the way, and life has been amazing.
What kind of impact did serving have on your family?
I would say serving in the Marine Corps and the impact on my family. So we were a very young family, and my wife and I got married. Goodness, I must have been 20 or 21. I think she was 19 or 20 when we got married. But we had our first child about 2 or 3 years later, and then our second one a couple of years later. But I got out of the Marine Corps just before we gave birth to our second child. I had planned on making the Marine Corps a career for me and my family, but things changed. I found another passion in law enforcement and followed that dream, and retired from that just a handful of years ago. But the positive impact I'd say it had on my family is what the military brought me in teaching me how to be a person, and to go for everything I could in life. And for those of you out there that know anything about the Marine Corps, you know about the motto Semper Fidelis, always faithful, and that really paved the way for my life after the Marine Corps. My wife and I went back to Tucson, where her family was, for my first daughter's baby shower, and we had a very good friend of the family. My wife set me up on a ride along with him with the Tucson Police Department, and I was in the patrol car maybe less than 5 seconds, and we were running code 3 lights and sirens to a hot call, and I knew that was my calling. Of course, I grew up like probably most kids do, playing cops and robbers, and I was always the cop. But from that point forward, I knew that that's where I was destined to be. I knew that I needed a college education. I was stationed out in Yuma, so I hit it hard at Arizona Western College and got my associate's degree there, which kind of started everything. And then the first job offer came from the Tucson Police Department. There were a couple thereafter, but I was already in the academy in Tucson, and then actually retired from the Tucson Police Department in 2014. One of the most interesting things I'll say that I still do is I had an opportunity to, or still do have an opportunity to work with an organization called Honor Flight. My wife actually started with them, and she's been on probably 5 or 6 trips now as a volunteer nurse. But if you don't know what Honor Flight is, I'm happy to have that conversation as well. But recently I had the opportunity to be a guardian for my father, and talked him into going. He was against it, just like many Vietnam era folks are, to do anything with being a veteran and be recognized. But after taking him back to Washington, D.C., and my wife was the nurse on the trip, it was incredible. It changed his whole outlook for the way that he and others were treated when they returned from Vietnam. And he is thrilled that he had the opportunity to take the trip, and he has finally realized that the United States and our country doesn't hold a grudge against them. They did what they were ordered to do, and it was amazing to be able to be at the Vietnam Wall, and we were able to put a pin on him, and those in the military understand what that is, but to tell him welcome home. And as a son, it was quite an honor and a privilege, and it changed my dad's outlook on being a veteran. Whenever he talks about coming home or the war, things that happened, I let it come out natural. I've never pushed the issue, and that's definitely in the 4 or 5 trips I've taken with Honor Flight to be a guardian. That's the same approach we do with all veterans. Right now they're recognizing World War II and Vietnam and Korea veterans, and I've never pushed the envelope, and that's never been a topic that he's discussed on right when he came back. But I do know that he was not treated well.
Who organizes the Honor Flight?
So Honor Flight's a nonprofit organization. There's actually 2 in the state of Arizona, one for northern Arizona, one for southern Arizona. And if I recall right, the cutoff is kind of a line right across the state, and I think they use Casa Grande as their cutoff point. It's 2 great organizations that get our World War II, Korean, and Vietnam veterans back to Washington, D.C. free of charge, which is incredible. The guardians pay, and the medical staff, like my wife and my daughter also volunteers as a nurse. They go for free, but the guardians do pay. So I got linked up with the Northern Arizona folks just because in my previous job we worked a lot with them. They are taking their 100th mission to Washington, D.C. I think it's in October. I don't know the date right off the top of my head, but their plan is to take 100 veterans, which is going to be incredible. So I'm not sure there is a wait list, but if there is, they're about to clear a lot of folks off of that list in a month or 2.
And is this done all over the country?
Yes, I don't know if every state has an Honor Flight organization. I believe it started 20 plus years ago, I think out in New York. But the interesting thing is when you're out in Washington, D.C., you will see Honor Flight groups from several different states. It's such an incredible and moving experience.
I think it would be very therapeutic for the veterans.
Yes, I again, with my dad, even after coming back from Vietnam, he still served another 20-ish years in the Air Force. And I never knew he held on to those feelings of when he returned from Vietnam, just that he wasn't welcomed home like he should have. None of them were. But times are different now. And going on the trip and back to DC, he saw the appreciation and the welcome home that they all deserve.
Did you have any misconceptions about the military before you joined?
I would say I was fortunate. I think we've all heard horror stories of the recruiter that goes out and gets the young man or young woman to join the military, and they thought maybe they're going to be, doing some certain specialty, and then they're doing something else. But growing up in the lifestyle, I feel that I had kind of a one-up. I didn't have to use it when I met my recruiter, great stand-up guy like all Marines are and should be. So I knew what I was getting into. I didn't have to lean on my retired Master Sergeant father from the Air Force to come in with me to the recruiter's office to make sure everything went well. But I will share a quick funny story that my dad got me. So when I was leaving, May 4th of 1992 it was, shipping off to boot camp, he wrote me a letter, handed it to me, and it was a phenomenal "I'm proud of you, son" letter. I don't remember the exact contents aside from the letter, but he drew a smiley face on the outside of the envelope, and that envelope fell out of my pocket when I got to boot camp. And I learned some lessons on what drill instructors can do to your body when they want to make a point of someone. So my dad did get me with the smiley face. I don't think that was his intent, but all these years later, that is our inside funny story. I encourage anyone that doesn't have their path planned in life, and even if you want to delay college, but you can go to the military and go to college. There's so many beneficial plans for getting a college education, but the Marine Corps, the military, they really paved my way in my life, and they taught me how to be an adult and be who I am. To steal the tagline of the Army, be all you can be, but I went the Marine Corps route, and
Would you have changed anything about your time in the service?
I would not have changed anything. I look back now, and without those years in the Marine Corps, and without those years of being an Air Force brat, I don't think I'd be who I am today. And I don't know. I feel I'm doing okay. So it was a great experience.
My name is Scott Worrell. I was in the Army National Guard. I got out as a Spec 4. I was also active Navy. I got out as a third-class petty officer. One day a recruiter had come to our high school and told me about the split option. You go do your boot camp between your junior and senior year of high school, and then when you graduate, you go to your AIT training. And I was 17, and then my parents signed and let me go. I did my National Guard boot camp at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And they got spiders, big ones.
You said it was not a great place.
I went for training to be a crane operator, then I cross-rated to be a heavy equipment operator, and then I cross-rated to be a truck driver.
Wow, that's a lot, isn't it?
It's all within the same area. I can run anything with a transmission. Then when I graduated, I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for crane operating school.
How was that?
They got big spiders there too.
They got big mosquitoes there too, don't they?
I think the spiders took care of them. I remember the 15-mile road march in the middle of the night. Yeah, your legs turn to jello and then you can't feel them anymore, so walking's not hard. I thought, you know, I need to possibly go into something else, and that's why I joined the Navy. I was able to they let me out early so I could go active duty. So I was discharged honorably from the National Guard, and my last day of the National Guard was my first day of the Navy. I went to the Navy. I was in a 900 company, which was band, drill team, and choir.
Which was what?
Band, drill team, and choir.
Oh.
I was in a choir. We did a lot of performing because it was close to December. It was cold. I did not go to an A school because I got into the apprenticeship program. Basically, you just learn the job as you go. Upon graduation, I came home, came back to Safford for a couple of weeks, and then I flew out and met my ship, the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. Actually got to land on it. It was cool.
What kind of ship was it?
That's an aircraft carrier. And I remember standing in the Air Department office and they asked, who here is mechanically inclined? Well, I can take anything apart and put it back together. So I raised my hand. I ended up going and working on catapults. And I did that for my entire time I was there. And working with the catapults, I felt sorry for all the other guys because we would do night flights and night ops and all this. The cats are only running, the aircraft are only running when we're awake. When we are asleep, there's no flight ops. so it's quiet. I was a catapult tech. I worked on the entire system of a catapult, from the water brakes all the way to the launch engine or launching valves, rotary retraction engine. I've been up inside the cylinders. That's creepy. They're not very big. And I got to know the system so well that I became the maintenance man of choice. Anything happened, I got called. If they wanted it done quick, fast, and in a hurry, I got called, because I knew the system like the back of my hand.
Did you spend your entire time on the Eisenhower?
I did.
So were you there the whole?
My whole 4 years, yes.
And you never went on to another ship?
No. I was trying to, I had heard a rumor that, well, the rumor proved to be factual. I had heard the John C. Stennis was going to be sent to the West Coast, and that's where I wanted to go. So I was looking at doing a transfer from the Eisenhower to the John C. Stennis, but they wanted to add another year to my hitch. And I thought, you know, it's not worth it. You know, and I saw a lot of neat things, but on the ship, the most memorable moment I ever had was I was approached by my first class petty officer and asked if I would do a spot check with the XO. And I know the systems and the maintenance checks like the back of my hand. I can do it without even looking at a book. And so I said, yeah, sure, why not? What I didn't know was the XO was doing spot checks with all of the divisions, V1, V2, V3, V4, and I was in V2. And some of them weren't going so well. So they told me, okay, the day that this is going to occur, we're going to be pulling into France. So you'll muster up down in the hangar bay, and we'll do a uniform inspection, and then you'll go up and change your clothes and meet the XO up in Cat 1. And he's going to go look at all the spaces. I'm like, okay, so I muster up, I get my uniform inspected, I take off to go change my uniform, and I get caught in the hallway and say, change of plan, the XO's on his way to Cat 1 right now, you just go. So I'm in my inspection dungarees. So I go ahead and I go. And the XO, he's standing there, and so I asked the XO, because I want to know how he wants this check performed. So do you want me to basically take you through it step by step on what the maintenance check would be, or do you physically want me to perform the maintenance check? Son, I want you to perform the maintenance check. Yes, sir. I take off my dungaree shirt, and everybody looks at me like I am crazy, like I had just stepped on somebody's dog. You don't take your shirt off in front of the XO. But I did, because I'm not going to ruin my shirt. And I sit down and I do this check with the XO as if I'm training him. And I go all the way through the entire thing. And we get done, and he says, you know, you sound very knowledgeable in the spot check, in his maintenance check. He says, but you didn't verbally say this last thing. But I think you did it, because it appears that you've done this 100 times. So he says, you passed. So they all go into the main office, and I'm getting the tools and stuff all put up and getting, you know, dressed, and I go into the office there, and my first class petty officer just happens to tell the XO, we've been trying to get this sailor to re-enlist or extend because his time's coming up. And the XO looks at me and says, son, if you'll re-enlist or extend, not only would I personally do the ceremony, we'll do it in a helicopter. And I looked at the XO and I said, sir, that sounds great, but I'm also ex-Army. I've been in a helicopter. I says, now if you said F-14, F-18 to let me take the stick, I'd say, let's do it right now. He says, well, son, I'm sorry, I can't do that. And I said, well, sir, I'm sorry, but I cannot re-enlist or extend. And yeah, that was, well, come to find out, because we passed that spot check, there's a little thing that they didn't tell me, because I'm walking up and down the hallways and other people from V2 are telling me, hey, Worrell, good job on that spot check. You right on. I'm like, why is everybody congratulating me on something that is so mundane? And then I found out that if we'd have failed the spot check, the entire division would not have gotten liberty in France. I would have cost it for everyone. We were the only ones that passed. V1, V3, and V4 did not get liberty. I think the catapult is roughly like 300 feet long. It will take an aircraft and move it from 0 to 150 miles an hour in like 2.3 seconds. The first port I went to was Israel. But the next time I went and did a med cruise, we didn't go to Israel. But I've been to Israel once, France 3 times, Greece twice, Spain 4 times, Turkey twice, Italy 3 times. You know, it just depends on what they want to do.
So does the tour take about a year then?
No, it's usually 6 months.
Oh, okay.
A ship moves faster than people think they do. And then after I did my tour with the Navy, I got out, came home, and I got a job with the Arizona Department of Corrections. And I've pretty much been in corrections off and on from one facility to another for 25 years. And I retired a couple of months ago.
What made you choose the Navy instead of choosing the Army? That's something that was more, you know, like in line with the National Guard.
I didn't like laying out in the dirt. I liked what I did, but I didn't like laying out in the dirt. My grandfather was Army. He was in the last horse-drawn cavalry. He lied about his age. He was 15 when he went in. My father was in the Navy. He was a mechanic on one of the ships. And I wanted to give that one a try. I do regret getting out of the Navy because I had so much fun. At the time when I got out, I was done. But hindsight 2020, I think back about it, I should have stayed. I got a frantic call from my mom. And I went over to her house to figure out what was going on because I got a letter from the Department of Defense. And a full-length legal letter. And I was thinking, they reactivating me? Didn't know what was in that letter. It was a letter of accommodation from the Rear Admiral of the Navy. And then I didn't hear anything from the military the whole time I was in the inactive Rated Reserves. And then I received paperwork showing that I was discharged from that honorably. And it wasn't long after that, 9/11. And I was thinking when I turned on the TV, because my mom called me, I was thinking, they're going to activate me. and I waited for that letter. I would have gone if I had to. I think I think that everybody should go. And at least get a taste, maybe shorten the amount of time that they have to be there. But I do think that everybody should go, because once you go and see these other foreign countries and see these other cultures, you will actually get a better understanding of the freedoms that you're trying to protect.
Just met some foreign exchange students at school, and they talked about their country, and I wanted to go see the world. That was one of the reasons I joined, and the other reason was, my grandfather had been in World War I, and my father was in the Korean conflict. The Army recruiter was the only one there. The Air Force was not there. The Marines he wasn't there, and neither was the Navy, so I joined the Army. Served in 1977, from August 1977 to April of 1989. I took basic training at Fort Bliss, El Paso, Texas. Then from there we went to Fort Sam Houston, which was in San Antonio, Texas, for the medical training. And then from there my permanent duty station was Landstuhl, Germany, 2nd General Hospital. And then after that I went to Walter Reed Army Medical Center. And after Walter Reed, I went to Tripler Army Medical Center, which was in Honolulu, Hawaii. And then after Honolulu, Hawaii, I traded, after 5 years, I traded my duty station at Tripler Army Medical Center to go to Fort Huachuca, which was Cerro Vista, Arizona. And then I got out after 12 years. Zugspitze, Alps in Germany. Town below is Garmisch, and man, it was just so beautiful. In Germany, then you could step in Austria, and just so beautiful. And then Tripler Army Medical Center was Hawaii, seeing the islands and how beautiful the water was and how warm it was that you could just get in. And that was year round, and the flowers, the greenery, 82 degrees year round. Hawaii was great. America is beautiful. I mean, I got one more state to visit, and I'll be able to say that I went to all 50 states, and the one state that I'm missing is Idaho. If you go in all. That's how I say it. And don't worry about what branch of service, because they're all brothers and sisters in there. But do it because you want to do it. Don't do it because somebody's forcing you to do it. And yeah, there is some consequences. The consequences are there might be a war, a conflict, and you might be in the middle of it. But I was lucky. Out of those 12 years, it was a Cold War and nothing happened. You have to remember that when you join the military, you're joining an organization that will train you and teach you. They'll mold you. First of all, when you go in, they're going to mold you into what they want. And what I mean by that is they're going to break you down from who you are when you go in to what they want you to be. They are. And you know what? It's for the best. You learn how to be a team player. You learn how to care. You're going to realize that. Now my daughter is in the military and she's serving, and she joined in 2010 and she's been active duty since. She's a sergeant first class, and she's stationed at Fort Sam Houston. She's Army Signal, and she was a drill sergeant for 4 years of her duty so far. My kids, I got 4 all together, and they're all educated. They all have their master's degrees. And when I first got out, I mean, I treated them like soldiers, which wasn't really good. In other words, I mean, I'd be waking them up on a holiday and you know, waking up at 6 in the morning to go put the flag up and honor the flag. And I don't know if that's positive or negative in their eyes, but they talk about it. Try to instill them God, family, and country. I'm proud of my daughter. She's learned a lot. She's done a lot. She's going to be on her way to Germany, I think at the end of the year, and I'm excited because I get to go. So I get to see some old stomping grounds. I'm in the Honor Guard now with Post 32 of the Honor Guard, and just going to the funerals and just seeing the flags being presented to the family members. It just makes you proud and makes you feel like, you know, that was a family, that was a brother or a sister that had just passed away, and that the love is still there, and it means a lot to me. To this day now, just knowing my veterans friends and all this stuff, and my brothers and my sisters, and you know, there's a bond there. We're family. You can never take that away. But it's God, family, and country. And you remember that. That's the one thing I'd ask people to remember.
My name is Jeremy Scott Pompeo. I was in the Army National Guard for 20 years, and I retired as a Sergeant First Class.
What inspired you to join?
Honestly, I didn't have a lot going for me. I didn't have any good direction, and I just had like a small part-time job. I signed up with the first recruiter that I met.
Did they find you, or did you find them?
They actually found me. The Readiness NCO from the unit was a friend of my mom's, and he brought the recruiter out to talk to me. And I was looking for an opportunity, so I just went with it.
But they didn't know necessarily that you were going to do that. They just wanted to present that to you.
Yeah. I probably didn't look like I would have signed up. I had long hair and looked like trouble, but yeah, it was what I needed.
Did you have family that served in the military?
Not really. I had a couple of great uncles on my mom's side that were in the military, but there weren't people that were in my life. I didn't really have anybody that encouraged me in that direction,
So you didn't really know what you were getting into when you joined?
No idea. No idea.
So how old were you when you joined?
I was 18. I joined right out of high school. So graduated in May. I think I spoke with the recruiter in the summertime, and then the next ship date was in the fall. So pretty quickly, right after getting out of high school.
What year did you join?
I joined in September of 1999.
And when did you get out?
May of 2020. Yeah. Yep.
That's a long time.
Yep.
So were you like a traditional guard?
Yeah, so I was an M-Day soldier, as they call it. I was part-time. During my career, we got activated several times. One time we went to Iraq, one time we went to Afghanistan, but I was in the same unit the whole time. We were in Iraq for a year, 1 year in Iraq, but that whole mobilization was probably 15 months. And about 3 months before that, getting ready. So earlier in the war, they would take units into theater for a full year. So all the getting ready before that was on top of everything. So we spent quite a bit of time getting ready here. Then we went to Phoenix and did some more preparation. Then we went to El Paso on Fort Bliss and we did all our pre-mob workup. And then we went to Iraq and then we came home, and I think it took about a month after we returned before we were like back at our houses. So all in all, 15, 16 months of activity.
And you did that twice.
It was a little different when we went to Afghanistan. By 2012, things were a little more streamlined. All in that one, I think we were gone 11 months total, but only 9 months was spent in Afghanistan.
So how did serving affect your family?
It was definitely hard on them. I'm sure it's a lot harder on the family that stays behind. We kind of get our mobilization orders. The military does their best to help you kind of get your affairs in order before you leave. And then all you have to think about the whole time you're gone is your job, and your spouse is home worrying about the kids and paying the bills. It's day there and night here, so communication's tough. I mean, there is no quick turnarounds on things. So, the people that stay behind have to pick up the slack like overnight. So, it's definitely hard on them.
Do they have some kind of, for lack of a better word, training for the person that stays at home?
There's a lot of programs to support the family. I don't know how well they do about promoting some of those things, and being in the Guard, your family doesn't live on base, so it's kind of a different environment. I think there's a lot more structure set up for active duty families, but the families around here that knew each other definitely helped each other out through that. They kind of had their own little community going on, and that definitely improved from 2005 to 2012. They started taking a lot more time with the families before and after the deployment to explain the programs, the resources that were available, handing out magnets, and just trying to get the word out any way they could. We're a combat support unit. We did dirt work, and so we had plenty of notice when our deployments were going to happen. So I think we knew 6 or 7 months early before we went to Iraq, and then we knew almost a full year before we went to Afghanistan, because you're part of a bigger plan, and that plan has all been laid out. So they already know if your unit is eligible to deploy well in advance before they even select your unit to go fill that role.
But there are some National Guard units that can go quicker than that?
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
yeah, for sure.
And then for local stuff, you can be called for
for local stuff. I mean, those orders, if there was a natural disaster type situation, those orders would come down through the governor's office to state headquarters, and they do maintain like an active role where they can call down the tree and see how fast they can get responses from everybody. So there are some things set up around having that level of readiness to respond to disasters like that. We definitely worked on projects that were strictly just for the benefit of the community. Like when we went to Alaska, we were building a highway across an island, and there's a small population of people that lived on the far side of the island, and so there'd been this massive construction project to build a highway across this mountain that had gone on for like 15 years, and it was really neat to fall into that process and get to play a part in that project. But that had nothing to do with national defense. I mean, it was literally about connecting these people that lived on an island back to the mainland to kind of improve their quality of life. It was a government project, so they need people with construction skills. And so units from all over the military were there. There was Navy people there, Air Force people. That was pretty neat to be involved in. We were only there for a few weeks, but you know, we definitely made an impact right there that was, you know, it's not usually what you would think of.
So what is your job? What was
I was
your
a
duty?
diesel mechanic. I worked on heavy equipment, and then over the years I ended up being in charge of the maintenance section for the unit.
So how did that affect the job that you're doing now?
It was definitely a foot in the door. I was always interested in working on vehicles and kind of understanding how things worked, but the military gave me actual technical training that kind of helped me start to understand how things worked, and that definitely carried me into the maintenance community up at the mine. I went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for boot camp, and at that time it was 9 weeks. And then right after that I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for 11 weeks to do my technical training.
Did you consider yourself a mechanic or a soldier or both?
In that training,
Or just through the 20 years?
well, it's interesting because the mechanical piece is there, but it's almost an afterthought, because you have to learn how to do all those tasks that a mechanic would do with body armor and a helmet and a gun, and you know, security was always the primary concern, and then fixing the equipment would be the next order of business. And so you definitely learn how to perform those tasks in a high stress environment, which I think that having to operate in dynamic situations like that has really helped me in my civilian career with managing like the stress and ups and downs that come just in normal business. Because I mean, even if everything else is falling apart, like nobody's going to try to kill us. You know, we're safe here. And so I don't know. I would say that you realize that you're a mechanic, but you're definitely a soldier. That discipline has to be there, and you're always a soldier first. And so it's definitely interesting. Being proficient at your skill with all that stuff on was a big part of it.
Was your unit like kind of integrated into the regular Army unit, or were you still a separated National Guard unit there?
So when you get mobilized like that, you do get attached to active duty elements, but your unit stays intact as its own entity, but you report up through the chain of command, and at some point in there it becomes active duty again. So like in Afghanistan, we were under a task force. The next level of leadership was National Guard folks, but the people above them were active duty. It was a privilege to get to go. You know, not every unit got deployed. Some units didn't make it to their deployments for various reasons, and our unit was selected, right? And so, you know, that was a big thing for us.
So you must have been a strong unit to be selected.
Yeah, I think so. I think we were really good at what we did. We had assessments done on us. It's routine. Higher levels come and kind of evaluate the frontline units and see how proficient they are at their tasks. And so we knew that we had done well on those evaluations to get selected. And then we did pretty good at our pre-mobilization stuff, where the big Army guys kind of, they run you through all the same training again, but they grade it a little more by the book, and just make sure that you're ready to go over there. Yeah, and we did well. You know, we did well. That's one thing that's unique about the National Guard and the reserves is the further you go up in rank, there's more and more responsibility, but you still have your whole life. You've got your whole regular life and career, and then you've got this other career that's part-time, but really takes a lot of energy and attention. And, you know, even just getting ready for a weekend drill, I've got to work on that a little bit every day. So I really have to fit that into my normal routine. And as responsibilities are growing on both sides, you really get good at juggling priorities. And that's something that I sort of felt like distinguished us when we got overseas. Things almost got easier because now we only had one job to think about. And, you know, there was a lot of things that I think we outshined our active duty counterparts on, because like we went from double duty to just, this is it. We have to go do this task tomorrow, and that's all we have to get ready for. And it just seemed like a lot less pressure, you know.
What was your favorite place that you've been able to travel to?
You know, my favorite place was probably in Iraq. I really liked the time that I spent there. It was really hot and not a very pretty place to be, but it was also interesting to be there kind of in the cradle of civilization. I mean, there's places that you learn about in history, and we would drive by a road sign that said, you know, Nasiriyah, or we got to visit a place called the Ziggurat, which is kind of a protected set of ruins where Abraham from the Bible was born. And so you're seeing these things that, you know, this is the start of humankind, was right here. It was just neat. There was a lot of history there. Afghanistan was really pretty, but it was cold. And in the wintertime, it was really cold, and people don't know that. Like, they don't know that, you know, it gets down below zero. Everybody thinks it's just the desert, but it's not.
What are some misconceptions about being in the military?
I think some common misconceptions are that it's all yelling and just this rigid discipline, and that couldn't be further from the truth. That is depicted because that's how training happens, but training is really just a reset. Just trying to reset sort of civilian tendencies and get your mind wrapped around paying attention to detail. After that's over, it's a completely different dynamic. Good leaders never lean on their rank. There's not a lot of yelling and push-ups, and there are some truly great leaders in the military that can inspire people to do, you know, to do great things in extreme danger, and that yelling doesn't work, you know, in those situations. Another misconception I think that's come out because of the war on terror and and all the media around that is that people come out of the military like somehow broken by their experiences, and that's not the case. I would say the vast majority of the people that I served with are successful because of their experience, not in spite of it. Most people go in and do their time, learn some things, and come out better for it.
Are you eligible for full benefits through the VA and all of that from the National Guard?
I have all my VA stuff. I have used my GI Bill. I actually just finished my bachelor's back in May, and I was using my GI Bill for that. And yeah, that's an awesome benefit. I was actually getting paid while I went to school, and I was doing night school and working at the mine, so that wasn't a bad deal. That was a big deal for me. I do have a retirement, but I can't collect it until they take age 60, and then they subtract your deployments. So the National Guard retirement is different than the active duty. But that's something good too. That's out there in the future. So when I'm 58, I'll start collecting my little pension there. So that's not too bad. And then we're eligible for all the same veterans programs that everybody else is. The VFW does a lot of good work with the government to protect veterans' rights, especially, things around the VA. A lot of that's driven by the VFW's efforts. And so it's good to be a part of that. I wish we could get more engagement from local veterans.
What are the eligibility requirements? How do you qualify?
It's pretty simple. You just have to have a DD-214 that shows you went to a combat zone. We have a poster that's a map that shows where you're eligible and has a list of ribbons or medals that would be awarded that are, guaranteed proof that, okay, you're eligible to join, versus the American Legion, where you just have to prove your veteran status. For us, you actually have to have been deployed to a combat zone.
Can someone qualify as a family member of someone who was?
We have an auxiliary. My wife's actually the president of the auxiliary. And I believe we have more auxiliary members active than we do post members right now, because post members, usually come with more than one family member. So, there's definitely an opportunity there, and we work really closely. The two clubs, if you will, we do most things together.
So how do you qualify as an auxiliary member? Who would that?
You have to have some family affiliation to an eligible service member. So they don't necessarily have to be living. Let's say you had a grandfather who was eligible.
So like my grandfather was in World War I.
Okay.
Would I qualify to join then? Or?
You should be, yeah. If you have his documents, you should be able to get that pushed through. I got the opportunity to go places and do things and have experiences that I wouldn't have had if I hadn't joined the military. And it definitely shaped me as a person and instilled some values in me that I wasn't going to pick up on the street. And it has definitely been a big part of my success in my civilian career because of the discipline and the drive and the work ethic that I learned there. You can spot the veterans out there in the workforce. You can tell, because they just have a stronger sense of responsibility for the things that they have to do. And it's definitely a benefit. It's definitely a benefit that wasn't on the brochure. I definitely feel like I earned my place in this country because I served, and I feel like I have an appreciation for this country because of being able to see other parts of the world and, you know, realizing what we have is something that should be defended. And yeah, I can't see a drawback to getting more people exposed to that feeling, that sense of accomplishment.
I was in the Navy, retired Chief Petty Officer. When I turned 18, we had the draft in those days. So when I turned 18, I registered for the draft. And a couple months later, I got a letter from the Navy saying that you are eligible for the draft. Have you thought about joining the Navy? And actually I had. So I went down and I talked to the recruiter, my dad and I, and they had a nice program where I could finish up my first year of college and just go to reserve meetings once a week for a couple of hours. And then at the end of my first year, then I could do my active duty, which is required. And so it worked fine, so I did that. Enlisted in November 1959. Eisenhower was my commander-in-chief there for a couple of months until Kennedy was inaugurated. My first time was up in 1969. I got out. Was out for 5 years. 1975, I decided I better come back in, get my last 10 years for retirement. So I went from 75, and then I retired in 1996. When I went on active duty in 1960, I got out of boot camp, reported to my first ship, and in January of 61, we did what we call a Westpac crew, Western Pacific. By the time I was 19, I had been to Hong Kong, Tokyo, Singapore, Borneo, Manila, and I got back to San Diego a week before my 20th birthday, and here I was, 19 years old, and I've been to all these places already. I had no intention of staying in. When I was in high school, and I was thinking about the draft and all of that, and I got in and I found out this isn't so bad after all. I had a good job, good duty stations, learned a lot, got to travel, meet lots of neat people, and I was getting paid for it. Plus, we get 3 hots and a flop, 3 hot meals a day and a bed to sleep in. I had 5 years broken service. I had 10 years in, and I'd just gotten a new job in civilian life, so I got out, let my enlistment expire. And then after 5 years, I said, well, that was stupid. I was halfway through the retirement. So I went down to the recruiter and said, can I get back in? He said, sure. I was a first class petty officer, E6, and had some good duty stations. And as a first class, you have some respect in the fleet. And so I had some good duty stations, and people appreciated what I did. And the petty officer is a technician, generally. We have special jobs, like the boatswain's mate takes care of all the equipment on board, on the decks. You have machinist mates who build parts down in the shop. You have yeomen who take care of all the administration, paperwork. You have commissarymen who do the cooking. You have radarmen, radiomen. They all have a special technique and special job that they do. I was lucky enough to be on a small ship. I was on an LST, landing ship tank. Those are the ones that hit the beach and open up the doors and all the tanks go running out. I was on one of those, and the crew is about 150 guys. And so we all knew everybody's first name, and you eat together, and you stand watch together, and you go through the battle drills together, and stuff like that. So you get to know these people. There's a friendship, a camaraderie that most civilians don't have. In fact, like when we were in boot camp, we were roughly 100 of us in the company. And at the beginning, for the first 3 weeks or so, we were 100 individuals trying to march together and all this other stuff. And one day we were doing some facing movements, and our bows face, and I just had this feeling we're all doing it at once. We were no longer 100 people, we were a company. Still, it's a good way to get experience, and if you stay in long enough, you get GI Bill, you can buy a house with no money down, you get discounts on your GI Bill loan, your housing loan, you get VA benefits. If you want to retire, you get even more benefits, but it's up to the person. If some people like it, I didn't think I was going to like it. And I got in there and said, this isn't so bad. Everybody's frame of mind, if you go in positive and think of the world positively, you'll have a good time. You might wind up in a not so great unit. You never know where they're going to send you. Those 4 magic words, needs of the service. It gets you every time. But make the best of where you are. We all have a place in the world. We all have a place, and sometimes it takes a while to find it. And so even private first class can do something. At least you're doing something for your country, and you're doing something for you, because you're getting that. You get the VA qualifications and loans and all those benefits, and you get a feeling that you've done something for your country.
Ryan McNeil. I was in the United States Air Force, and I was a senior airman.
What year did you join?
I joined in 2007.
And how long were you in?
I was in until about 2014, 6.5 years.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
And what inspired you to join?
It's just been with me since I was a little kid. I was 17, and I was really, really close to joining the Army when everything broke out after 9/11. Even had the recruiter come over. I started going to college for a little while. You know, I had to pay for college. I had to pay for my apartment, everything on my own. And my friend, one of my really close friends, he was in the Air Force, and he'd actually kind of convinced me to just do the Guard at first, and just so that way I can continue going to school. And he said, do not do the Army. And in some ways, I'm like, I'm kind of glad he talked me into going that route, because it afforded me a lot of other opportunities. After I joined the Air Force and I talked to the recruiter convinced me to become an MP, and that's how it all started.
Were you happy with that route?
Yes, actually, and that's not to say like everything has its good experiences. They have their bad experiences, but in the end, looking back at everything, I walked away with a lot of good experiences that had less lasting effects. I have a lot of friends all over the place that like I would not have ever met under any other condition. I could bump into any one of them and we would pick up where we had left off. It's almost like the brother, even though not by blood, it's that person, whether it's a brother or sister, that you had that close-knit relationship with, that you can't get anywhere else.
Did you stay MP during your whole career?
I did, yeah, the whole 6.5 years. And sometimes I wonder, like, I had thoughts of joining other, in the Air Force, they call it AFSC or Air Force Specialty Code, but I had thoughts of becoming IT, but I don't know. Like I think when I got towards the end of my time, I was like, all right, this is it for me, and I was just kind of ready to move on into more of a civilian role.
Did you consider law enforcement after you got out?
I actually did. I was really close. So in Illinois, I did the physical testing. They have you do a PT test, which to me was just like carrots. I mean, it was so easy. But anyways, did the physical test, the written test. There was only one agency that I didn't qualify for, and that was Illinois State Police. I missed it by 2 points. But other than that, you know, it was kind of like free pick. But I don't know. I'd also had, when I was a kid, I messed around with, you know, old school computers with MS-DOS and Windows 3.1, if you guys have heard of that. And I just kind of decided to go that route because I wanted to try something new. And the job that I actually got right now, I actually work in public safety, you know, working on, you know, computer-aided dispatch. So in a way, I kind of married the two, technology and law enforcement. So I guess it's my way of, since I have the means, take care of the software that takes care of our first responders. So in the Air Force at the time, we would get issued very, very basic equipment. So we would get we'd actually get the old school Motorola radios. Ironic, isn't it? We get the old radios, and you know, they were just as basic as can be. Like, I mean, they're old first responder radios. So I guess in a way, the Air Force would get the hand-me-downs, and we would get the hand-me-down of the hand-me-downs kind of deal, and we'd have to work with that. So it was very basic.
But that helps you to kind of get the basics of the system, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you know, when it comes to you know, responding to routes, things like that, or responding to emergencies, you definitely have that kind of experience that will definitely translate in one way, shape, or form. I didn't work dispatch. So I didn't get that end user experience, but everything else, you know, pretty much did translate.
Where did you go to boot camp?
For me, every single Air Force member goes through Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. So yeah, and I got the pleasure of doing tech school at Lackland as well. So I stayed there throughout the whole training while everybody else got to go, you know, to different bases. They didn't have to deal with the drill instructors for any longer afterwards. For me, like you walk around Lackland, you're still, you know, you're still prey. So yeah.
And where were you stationed?
So my first duty station was at Scott Air Force Base, Illinois. It's out in the middle of a cornfield. You can be driving through, you know, rural Illinois with endless cornfields in sight, and then all of a sudden you get off on one exit, and boom, there's this big big base. Decided to do active duty instead of the 1 weekend a month. I went to Baghdad, Iraq. Did a 6-month tour there. Nothing really too exciting. I mean, in a good way. I mean, it was an all-expense trip paid for by the U.S. government, but it was obviously, you know, pretty hot. But yeah.
And were you serving as MP there also?
Yeah, but not in the same capacity as on the home base. When we got over there, Army had jurisdiction, so they handled the law enforcement. It's really weird. They even have law enforcement over the area that they had. And then we were more of security. So you can be in charge of, let's say, prisoner transportation when it comes to transporting between, you know, camps, outlying camps, and the main base area. You're also responsible for the security of your base. Army handled the law enforcement aspect of it.
What was it like to transition back to being a civilian?
Oh my gosh. It's like entering into a completely strange world. It's different. You have to get used to speaking. You have to get used to the mannerisms, just letting things go, whereas in the military was a completely different story. You have to relearn how, like what bones to pick, what to say and how to say. Jargon goes right back out the door. The experience, people are a lot more independent of everything, whereas when you're in the military, you're fostered into an environment where you depend on each other.
Would you have changed anything about your time in the service?
No, because it wouldn't have brought me to where I am today. It wouldn't have made me the person I am today. The memories that I have, the people that I've met, that I've worked with, and continue to have, those lasting relationships. Not a single thing. If you're going to do it, go in with an open mind. Do it with a sense of purpose. You're not always going to agree with everything, but you're going to have some experiences that will last you for a full lifetime. Things that you won't forget. And there's always going to be the bad experiences. So for those that see the really bad stuff, just know that there's always support all around you. Don't ever clam up and, think that you're on your own. You're always going to be surrounded by military members. Even after you get out, they're still out there. They're all over the place. And so if you ever struggle, after you get out, just know that there's always going to be that support system.
How do you feel being a veteran?
It gives me a sense of pride. Sometimes I look back and there are those moments where I long, for that environment again. There have been times that I've actually thought about re-enlisting. Keep the patriotism alive these days and encourage it in our youth. Whatever you need to do, be that parent that teaches their kid, to just instill that sense of patriotism. I think a lot of people are forgetting about that.